All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to the Q3 Global FOREWARN community meeting, which will obviously be focusing on volcanoes. If you've just joined us, please do take a moment to put your name and your organization into the chat and say hello to everybody who's on the call today. There's quite a few of us. And then, yeah, we can get started. Just quickly, a note on interpretation. We do have at least one presentation that will be in French today. So if you would like to hear that in English, please do join the English channel now. And if you would like to listen to the whole meeting in French, please do join the French channel. The interpretation is available. If you look to the bottom of your screen, there should be a globe icon that you can access. And if you go through there, you can join the channel that you would like to listen to, whether that's French or English, and that should work throughout the meeting for you. So to start with, I'll just go through the agenda for today. We'll start with some opening remarks. We'll start with opening remarks and updates from the team. And then we'll hear from Christine Murphy, who is the meal advisor with our team, who will talk to you about start fund alerts that have taken place in the past in anticipation of volcanic activity. Following that, we'll hear from the Start Network Hub in DRC, who will talk about work that's been done there, anticipating volcanic eruptions. And then we have a couple of speakers from the Philippines who will talk about the kind of research that goes into modeling for volcanic eruptions, and also one example of a response to an anticipation alert for volcanic activity. And following that, we're hoping to have some time for open discussion, for any questions that you would like to ask, and for some conversation. So to start with, I'm handing over to Ana Dizon from the Philippines. Ana, over to you, please.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to introduce our speaker, our guest, to do the opening remarks, Dr. Cedric Daep. Dr. Daep is the head of the Albay Public Safety and Emergency Management Office, or APSEMO. He developed the plan for the creation of the Provincial Disaster Management Office of Albay and the first local disaster management office in the country and in Asia. This was approved in 1994. He is a part-time professor at the Bicol University Graduate School, where he helped develop the program on disaster risk management and health emergency under its master's program in public administration. He acquired his formal study in meteorology and special studies and training on volcanology in Japan and seismology in the Shanghai Seismological Bureau. Recently, Dr. Daep was in the news when he asked for the government to allocate funding for periodic and post-typhoon dredging of rivers, channels, and gullies at the foot slope of Mayon volcano to prevent lahar and other volcanic debris hitting populated communities during prolonged heavy rains. Unfortunately, yesterday, he had to do a very, very last-minute appointment and is not able to join us. But he sent us his message, which will be read and shared with us, to be shared with us by Leah Gonzalo, my colleague. Leah?
So greetings to fellow workers in public service and humanitarian work. Today is a typical day for most, but to us, it is another day to pursue answers and long-term solutions to unending issues and emerging challenges in reducing disaster and climate risks. Pursuing that mundane and seemingly impossible task led to what is now the Disaster Risk Reduction Program of the Philippines, that was founded on the fundamental principle of human security as enshrined by the nation's constitution and local government code, for which the state is obligated to promote the general welfare of its populace through its local government units. However, it was a long and arduous road that led to what it is today. While disaster control measures in the Philippines were already in place to mitigate impacts of calamities as early as the late 70s, the government's response was reactive, centralized, and limited by existing policies at that time, and it remained as such for the next 3 decades. However, the need to look at disaster risk reduction in the context of governance, infrastructure, economics, social services, sustainability, and overall development and growth is the only way to attain a meaningful, progressive, and responsive society. This can be achieved by introducing a new paradigm, a zero-casualty proactive approach, whole-of-government, and an inclusive disaster risk reduction and building back better strategy. These were complemented by applied strategies of risk mapping, vulnerability and capability assessment, and contingency planning, criteria-based early warning system, science-based forecasting and decision-making, which are a few of the innovations and measures that facilitated our capacity building and overall disaster risk reduction objectives. These are the outcomes and realization of Albay's experience, whose geographic location in the Western Pacific Basin and the Pacific Ring of Fire made the province as the disaster capital of the country and provided a natural laboratory for disaster preparedness and response. This is amplified by the presence of Mayon volcano, whose geomorphology threatens 8 towns surrounding its slopes during its period of unrest. Since the enactment of the DRR program in Albay in 1994, Mayon volcano eruption is viewed not only as a hazard, but also an opportunity to innovate preparedness and response across all sectors. The protracted effect and multi-sectoral impact of Mayon volcano eruption underlines the significance of science-based forecasting and decision-making, collaboration, solution orientation, demand-driven relief, development approach in rehabilitation and recovery, and evacuation not rescue, among other things. These were all translated into various actual and tangible outputs, relocation program, livelihood support, livestock evacuation, to name a few. The outputs and consequent long-term outcome are a result of the collective participation of various institutions and humanitarian agencies involved in the preparedness and response effort. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, whose partnership and active collaboration with Albay Province provided timely warning and response action from the provincial down to the community level, galvanized the marriage between science and disaster risk governance, a critical element in achieving all our lessons learned. The contributions of our various humanitarian partners, including members of START Network, facilitated response actions early and post-disaster and early recovery, and it has the existing capabilities and practices of Albay in its DRR initiatives, not only for volcanic eruption, but for all other hazards. The accomplishments of Albay would not have been possible without the concerted efforts of all actors previously mentioned. Ultimately, community participation and support are paramount, which can only be achieved not only by knowledge and information, but by understanding their risks and vulnerabilities and how to reduce them. May this meeting provide another opportunity to innovate and instigate partnerships among humanitarian actors and government organizations and become more responsive to the challenges and needs of the time. Thank you. That's all from Dr. Daep's opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Leah. And thank you, of course, to Dr. Daep as well for sharing those opening remarks with us. Apologies for the slight technical issues there with the screen share. Unfortunately, I think the bandwidth in our office is a little bit low, which is causing some of the blurriness on the screen. But hopefully that's a little bit better for everyone. Do let me know if you're struggling to see though, and I'll see what we can do to make that clearer. So moving on then, just to talk a little bit about the FOREWARN global community and what FOREWARN is and what FOREWARN does. So FOREWARN stands for the Forecast-Based Warning Analysis and Response Network. And as you can see here, everyone in the meeting today is a part of the global FOREWARN community, which is open to anyone interested in working in anticipation. The goal of FOREWARN is to share high quality research and analysis to try and improve and mainstream anticipatory action. FOREWARN is organised, as you can see here. So we have thematic subgroups, which have an advisory role for the START Fund in terms of providing a specific anticipation to support to START Fund anticipation alerts. We also have the local FOREWARN national FOREWARN pilots, which are active in Bangladesh, the Philippines, Madagascar, Pakistan, and soon to be in Nepal as well, and hopefully planning to expand to DRC in the future. Moving on, what does FOREWARN, how does FOREWARN aim to achieve this goal? This is through developing a network of experts, as you can see in this top quadrant here. And the idea is that the network of experts, at both national and at global level, will be available to provide anticipation technical support to START network members and other actors in anticipation and in the anticipation landscape. We also work through advocacy and engagement to try and contribute to various coordination bodies and make sure that anticipation is being mainstreamed on a wider level. And finally, through hazard monitoring and anticipatory action plans. So this is through building forecasting tools that can be used in advance of a hazard becoming a disaster to make sure that action plans can be put in place to act before the impact is felt. Just to quickly talk about the team, as you can see, we have a team in each of the countries where National FOREWARN is present, and also the UK team. Everybody is available on the call today, so if you have any questions relating to any of those contexts, please do put your question into the chat, and someone will be available to respond to your question and to reach out and get in touch with you if that's what you'd like. So moving on then, I'm just going to hand over to Ashraf to introduce the National FOREWARN updates. Ashraf, over to you.
To be playing the video.
I'll just move on to that now. All right.
Hi everyone, this is Javed Mirdad from FOREWARN Bangladesh. Welcome to the FOREWARN Global Meeting.
And this is Ashraf. Welcome you all. FOREWARN Bangladesh is doing a lot right now. We do have 6 hazard-specific expert group on landslide, flood, cyclone, riverbank erosion, cold wave, heat wave, and health hazard like dengue. Right now we are developing early action protocol for landslide, riverbank erosion, and flood, and we are trying to develop that kind of protocol, thinking the community-based approach in the core, so that we can promote the locally led anticipatory action. And our system is right now supporting the flood DRF systems, and we are trying to also consider the cyclone DRF system in the future. That's why we are working with the academia and the experts to develop that kind of system in place so that we can initiate it from next year. Besides that, we are developing our theory of change so that in the light of Global FOREWARN, we can track the progress of FOREWARN for upcoming years. Are we done, Javed?
Currently we are monitoring 6 disasters. We start with landslide, then flood, cyclone, riverbank erosion, cold wave, and dengue.
So thank you very much for listening us, and bye-bye.
Don't forget, if you know someone interested in this field, then please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good morning, good afternoon everyone, depending on where you are today. It's always a pleasure to share with you the main points of our realizations during this last quarter. With regard to the forecast-based financing, following the process of setting up the early action protocol for drought, 4 districts were able to have their EAP in place. Among these 4 districts, 2 are from CRS zones and 2 from WHH ones. Any trigger is met for this current season according to the data monitoring system. Also, in terms of the national coordination, we are now part of the steering committee of the Anticipatory Action. Led by the National Office of Disaster Risk Management, this committee involves all of the organizations working on anticipatory actions. National and international organizations are part of this committee, as well as for the UN agency. A framework document has been developed to federate any anticipatory action initiative in the country. Regarding the cyclone anticipation mechanism, during the learning sessions, members mentioned the difficulty of implementing the anticipatory actions in a very short time. The reason for this is that they were waiting for a certain green light at the level of each organization to start the actions. Also, during the learning sessions with the community, there were some propositions on prioritizing the equipment of the shelter sites. Members are in the process of submitting proposals for the learning grant for now. All these lessons learned will be very useful in refining the direction of any new cyclone anticipation perspective. At the national level, anticipatory actions are about to be integrated into early warning system initiatives. Given that there are multiple initiatives on early warning system developed in the country, an initiative has been developed to federate and to coordinate all of them. Recently, anticipatory actions will be part of the early warning system in different levels of intervention. Aiming to apply the Start Ready mechanism, Madagascar is preparing to start preparation at both the organizational and institutional levels. And finally, we were involved in different levels of coordination, such as for the Africa Dialogue Platform and the Eco, Sovereign and Indian Ocean workshop. To close our presentation today, thank you for your continued attention. Any questions or comments is welcome on the chat box. We'll be replying to them as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon. Now, the update from the Philippines. FOREWARN saw a 50% increase in the number of its core and associate members coming from major academic institutions in the Philippines. We are also expecting the completion of the work of our current batch of interns supervised by academe-based FOREWARN experts. They are working on the enhancement of dengue risk analysis model and platform for better user interface using actual data from dengue hotspots in the Philippines. Two, they're also currently doing the completion of landslide inventories in landslide-prone areas of Albay and Sorsogon provinces and the enhancement of the threshold for rainfall-induced landslide from a previous start-supported study to improve early warning and anticipation of cascade hazards. The output of the internship program was also recently presented at the FOREWARN risk briefing together with FOREWARN experts in meteorology, infectious diseases, and landslide susceptibility. The event was attended by humanitarian and DRR practitioners from INGOs, local NGOs and embassies, participants from the academe and local government units. Our formal and informal partnerships and collaboration has expanded with ongoing MOUs and letter of commitments signed and in process with UTRI, Graduate School of UPLB, the School of Environmental Science and Management, and the Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology. START Network, through FOREWARN, is providing strategic support to the SURF-AA pilot implementation with the coordination of the forthcoming publication of the SURF-AA pre-crisis survey. FOREWARN Philippines continue to actively support the DRF system built for tropical cyclones in the Philippines. And currently, we are part of the co-organizer team of the 2022 Asia-Pacific Dialogue Platform scheduled from 1 to 3 November in Bangkok, Thailand. Thank you.
Great. So that was an overview of the updates and the achievements from the national FOREWARN teams for 2022. So now I'm handing over to Christine Murphy, the meal advisor with the START Network, who's going to talk about previous alerts that have been raised to the START Fund for anticipation of volcanic activity. Christine, over to you.
Thanks, Milli. I'll try and speak slowly, apologies. So hi everyone. The START Fund actually, as I start with most caveats, has only had a total of 8 alerts for volcanic activity. And since 2017 has activated 6. However, 4 of these have been raised under anticipatory action, which is a higher proportion than most crisis types. Due to this and another factor that we'll come on to in the next slide, the START Fund actually does not have a lot of data or records on successfully anticipating a specific volcanic activity. So this is more of a qualitative review of learning that has been conducted and reflections on members' reports of why the START Fund might struggle to fund what can be considered successful volcano-related alerts anticipatorily. And what I mean by successful is well, I'll come on to that anyway. So as we can see here, it's a very basic low data heat map explaining where our volcanic alerts sit. These are across Guatemala, DRC, and Philippines only, so quite concentrated. And as we can see, the successful question about anticipation is coming from the START Fund report form, which is, did the crisis occur as forecasted? Which generally we rely upon to see if the forecast that was used was accurate and relevant to the funding that was dispersed. As you can see in the top right hand corner, we've not had a great history with positive responses for volcanoes. Actually, none of the anticipation of volcanic activity alerts had volcanic activity within the relatively short 75 to 120 day window of an active START Fund alert. So the 45 days for implementation plus the 30 days for monitoring, or in some cases it's been a 90-day implementation followed by 30 days monitoring, so 75 to 120 days. For another crisis type, this could definitely be seen as a result of an inaccurate forecast, which obviously the START Fund is happy to manage with its no regrets funding approach to anticipation. However, for the specific volcanoes that have been anticipated through the START Fund, for example, the 5-day forecast of Nyiragongo in DRC, this has been reported by members in DRC as a reason for previously raising their anticipation alert, specifically and deliberately without a time-bound forecast, in order to use the START funds for no-regret funding and focus more on preparedness rather than anticipation of a specific event. The recent alert in the Philippines for Taal volcano, which was last August, is also currently actually being assessed for efficiency as a preparedness project instead of a time-bound anticipation project. So essentially seeing if there are residual positive effects of an anticipation project, even if the actual event takes place maybe 3 or 4 months after the project finished. On the next slide, we can see a summary of the types of activities and the variation between anticipation and response. And unsurprisingly, as with lots of anticipation crisis types, the activities really focus on soft sensitization, awareness, and planning. And unsurprisingly as well, they have lower cost per beneficiary and higher reach. But due to the potential long period of time between fund release and activities being implemented, and then actually needing to rely on that training, plan development, evacuation, site improvement or assessment, the long period can reduce the effectiveness of these activities as preparedness activities, as we've seen from other crisis types like heat wave, where sensitization messaging is retained less and less over about the period of 6 months. This is also relevant for evacuation and contingency planning due to two of the volcanoes that have been alerted to the START Fund reporting that the proper protocol is to update contingency plans and evacuation plans on an annual basis. So even if this is done as a preparedness activity, as a one-off, it's not necessarily going to have a tangible effect whenever there is actually volcanic activity. As I've already mentioned, the Philippines are conducting, agencies in the Philippines are conducting an evaluation of the long-term effectiveness of Taal activities from August 2021. However, response activities are much more typical of just general displacement and emergency relief. So the next slide, these are from the alerts which have not been anticipatory. And the members have identified these as potential reasons why anticipation might not be possible. Obviously, the first one, which is referring to the Guatemala Fuego volcano, can't exactly be managed or mitigated in any way. due to the rapid onset type eruptions amid ongoing low-level activity that is experienced there. However, the other two reasons are things that have been expanded upon in learning activities by START Fund members. So even if monitoring and acting on volcanic monitoring data seems as if it should be straightforward, I guess actually in practice, members have kind of identified these as 3 reasons why anticipation of volcanoes is not as straightforward as we might think it is. This last point, especially on multidisciplinarity of stakeholders, is an element that's been identified across both anticipation and response alerts as an issue or as an obstacle that needs to be managed. I guess I just saw a question from Matthias in the chat, and of the 6 projects that have been funded, 4 of them were for specific volcanic eruption, 1 for Lahar and 1 actually for displacement as a result of volcanic activity. So that was actually earlier this year, and it was for cross-border displacement in Rwanda, well, from DRC to Rwanda. So the majority of them are for specific volcanic eruptions rather than necessarily Lahar or mudslides as a result of that. On lessons from anticipation projects, I guess it's difficult to identify specific lessons from anticipation projects when the hazard did not occur during the reporting period. And that's obviously when START Fund, due to its shorter timeframe, collects its data. However, the Philippines definitely generated general recommendations in a context where crisis management is generally a bit stronger, including community engagement and acceptance, and distribution of physical items such as inclusive early warning kits as early as possible in the process in case of volcanic activity. The slightly older DRC anticipation alert has some slightly different lessons, I guess, because of the context in which they're working, which is preparing a better exit strategy. So any awareness activities are continued, contingency plans are owned by stakeholders who can continue to use them, and needing to link community created plans to sectoral plans. So we can see here that actually, as is kind of the fact from DRC, that there's more of a call for general preparedness and ongoing investment in readiness related to volcano, rather than the kind of one-off support that a START Fund anticipation alert can necessarily provide. So on the next slide, both of those alerts actually were to some extent informed by analysis for action grants that had been conducted by members. So these both took place in 2018, and both of them actually were used pretty soon afterwards in an anticipation alert. The DRC analysis for action grant was applied for, which, if people aren't aware, is a relatively small amount of funding, which is meant to help alleviate or reduce the difficulties in forecasting a specific crisis, making it easier for people to act based on a forecast and reducing the obstacles to doing that. So the DRC rationale was that contingency plans had not been updated in 3 years, despite, as I said, and as they said in their report form, the fact that these are meant to be updated on an annual basis. The general lack of anticipatory funding, and therefore they wanted to raise awareness with the analysis for action grant in order to change that, and also to inform the design of a preparedness intervention. And the Philippines' intention was to conduct a slope map study to identify areas that would be threatened by mudflow or lahar in the case of volcanic activity, and to engage and share that data with different community stakeholders and local government, and use the mapping data to raise the alert for the hazard if necessary. As I said, both of those occurred, so both resulted in a START Fund anticipation alert. And as we can see, the DRC results, or the learning, really did specify that the budget was insufficient, and a short-term program like this was not really enough to maybe cover the gaps that had been identified. indicating again that preparedness is really the and the longer term investment is really what would be needed there, at least to be able to convert a forecast into a successful contingency plan deployment. So they specifically did a vulnerability assessment and a CAP study with the community around Nyiragongo, which indicated low levels of preparedness for future volcanic eruptions. They identified gaps in current plans and made recommendations to improve programming, including advocacy for DRR to be included. And the recommendation was to take a no regrets preparedness approach to alerting the START fund, as the 5-day forecast is too short to act. So by the time an accurate forecast would come in from the monitoring station, it would be too late to anticipate effectively. And that's what they did in Alert 273, which was generally a short-term preparedness investment. The Philippines, the lessons that came out were, well, the results was a very thorough map of large areas of various barangays with high levels of vulnerability to lahar, and a recommendation on improving the hazard data that strengthens contingency planning, targeting, and DRR management. They also had general recommendations to the various stakeholders, including how protocols are established and updated, and handing data over to stakeholders with which kind of highlighted one of the challenges, which was quite clear in both of these reports, which is that having to work with various stakeholders and hand data over, and also rely on monitoring data from maybe government institutes and things like that, can cause quite a challenge whenever it comes to NGOs collaborating with the public sector in terms of anticipation of volcanoes. So those are kind of a summary of the lessons that have been sought, I guess, by START network members through those 2 grants. So a real focus on volcanoes in 2018. And yeah, I think some of the lessons are about having increased levels of data, whether that's vulnerability data or mapping data, as was kind of provided in the Philippines, but then also being able to work more effectively with contingency plan holders, evacuation plan, protocol monitors, and being able to work consistently with them, which I think probably takes a bit more investment and a bit more of a long-term approach than the START fund is necessarily able to provide. However, based on whatever work goes in preparedness for that, obviously the START fund is, yeah, evidently happy to help fund if there is a volcano activity, but that preparedness gap is something that has been mapped out and evidenced quite strongly throughout these lessons. So that's that. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was off camera the whole time. Apologies.
No problem. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment because I think there are a few questions in the chat. So I wonder if you'd be happy to just maybe take a look at some of those. So just to see who's raised questions, I think there was one from Eve that has maybe been responded to already in the chat. But looking through there, I think you responded to Matthias's question already, but Blaise has put one in there. I don't know if, Blaise, if you would like to come off mute if you're able to, and maybe ask your question kind of aloud.
Hello everyone, thank you for the flow. My question was about on the slide they put activities about the anticipation, but I couldn't find the assessment of the population behavior, because during the volcanic crisis, research shows that it is something which can influence people, even though we have a good plan, a contingency plan, and everything was planned before, but the behavior of the population, it is something which is important to assess and to know how people can react in case of a volcanic emergency. So it's something that must be included in the anticipation activity. I don't know why maybe they don't take account the population behavior as an anticipation activity to be assessed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks, Blaise. I think within the, just that one slide on, I maybe used too many acronyms. I said VA, KAP, which was referring to the community behavior study that was done in DRC under the analysis for action to then inform the project. So yeah, it's definitely having a greater understanding of what activities the community themselves take. I think really helped inform the DRC alert. I think in terms of mapping gaps and seeing where the community actually needed additional information or to strengthen or to improve planning and evacuation routes, I think that was, yeah, definitely a key element. I'm not sure whether for necessarily all anticipation of volcano alerts, whether there would be time to do a baseline behavior assessment before activities can begin. So it might be something that needs to be in place already, simply because I guess a normal start fund project is 45 days only, and I would say a behavior assessment for a relevant proportion of the community might take quite a long time. But yeah, I think that, apologies if I skipped over that, but definitely aware of how much the vulnerability assessment and the CAP study informed the DRC alert. And I think one of the things that we had wanted to perhaps explore was about the whether or not the work that had been done in Alert 273 had kind of ongoing or longer term behavior change effects whenever it came to the eruption of Nyiragongo earlier this year. However, I think due to kind of time and capacity, that wasn't kind of explored further, and I think we had sort of assumed that a 4-year gap might mean that the information had not necessarily been or maybe not retained to the extent that we would be able to attribute it to that project. But yeah, I think the community focus of Alert 273 and the analysis for action grant was really clear. So apologies if I skipped over that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Christine.
you for. Yeah, I would like to add that maybe to advise to the GRC team to improve their collaboration with the local university, but because I guess that there are some researchers who work on the population behavior, and the DRC team can use these findings and to improve and to understand exactly how, for example, the population consider the risk, and it is something which is important to even to prepare the contingency plan or the activity of the response or the anticipation. So it is necessary to continue working in collaboration with local university and researcher to know how the findings they are getting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blaise. That's a great recommendation, and we are actually about to move on to listening to a presentation from the DRC team. Anna, Eve, I can see you both have your hands up. Just in the interest of time, we are going to need to move on. Could I ask you to pop your comments into the chat box, and then maybe if we have some time at the end, we can come back round. But I am just going to ask if we can move on to the DRC team now to hear from them, if that's okay. Eve, I don't know if you're presenting this one or if I should hand over to Roger, but just a quick note, if you are listening in English, this presentation I think will be in French, so please do go down to the interpretation at the bottom of your screen. And you can join the English channel to hear the presentation in English, or obviously if you'd like to listen in French, please do join the French channel. Thank you. All right, Roger, over to you.
Wow. What? Okay. Just.
Roger, oui, la parole, c'est à vous. allez-y. Et je peux partager l'écran si vous voulez.
Oui, 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 oui.
Ok, super. Si vous arrêtez, je peux partager. Allez-y.
Partage l'écran. Ah. Ah, wow. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Clovis Wabenga, DRF Program Coordinator. And this is our presentation. As you can see, we have got some grants, previous grants. This is the analysis for action grant, £10,000 for the assessment of the level of preparation in Goma. And for anticipatory actions grant, we raised £150,000 for preparedness activities in 2019. For the action grant, analysis for action grant, it was 2018. Then for community innovation, we had $200,000 for community innovation project. And for the DRF program, we were able to raise 260,000. This is euro in 2022. The two were for 2022. As you can see, there are so few challenges we have with the volcanic eruption in terms of preparedness and the response. This is the uncertainty of a volcanic eruption. It is uncertain or very short early warning period. And then a question is, when is the correct window of opportunity for early action? This is unknown since there's the uncertainty of the eruption. And then we said that the window of opportunity for early action is so difficult. And this was seen during the 2021 eruption, Nyiragongo eruption. There's another challenge is the low levels of preparation. We have the contingency plan that was set up in 2015 is not yet reviewed. The other is not timely community early warning system. There's no timely warning system. The weak institutional capacities and political will. And as you all know, there were so many things that happened during the late volcanic eruption. There was so many things, including weakness of the institutions. Yeah, you can go up. Can you go up? Okay. As you can see, yeah, try to go up. Yeah. As you can see, the volcanic, this is the mountain Nyiragongo, which is still active up to now. And you can see that the houses are not very far from the volcanic eruption. Here I come back to Blaise's behavior studies necessary, because people, even after this late eruption, people have started building on this site again. Here we speak of the DRR strategy document for the DRC, the Sendai framework, and the African Plan of Implementation of Sendai framework. Insurance companies can offer disaster risk financing opportunities in Congo in accordance with Article 52 of the law on the DRC Insurance Code. Consequences of volcanic eruptions can also be covered here. Successful experience of public-private, these are opportunities. Successful experience of public and private partnership in several sectors in Goma can also be capitalized in the financing of volcanic disaster risk. So we have shown the three windows of opportunities here. A strategy document for DRC, which is available, but we also have missed opportunities. This is volcano community alerting. The alert signs are not updated on time, and sometimes people don't know what to do when there's a volcanic eruption. Can you go up? Yeah. You have here, there are some lessons learned. What are the lessons learned? Community have the better knowledge of their environment now. If we can support them, they can contribute to the disaster risk reduction. This is the first lesson that we have learned. Another lesson, DRF and humanitarian innovation approaches are new in DRC humanitarian setting. Thus, for contributing to change, more time is needed if we want change. The other lesson that we've learned, participatory vulnerability and capacity assessment provide more detail on the vulnerability of issues and local community capacities for disaster risk reduction than quantitative studies can provide. We conducted the two studies, and this is what we come up with. Then the other lesson is that participatory vulnerability and capacity assessment is one of the good awareness raising approach on the risk management. These are the lessons we've learned from the latter actions that we have conducted. I mean, participatory vulnerability studies that we have lately conducted. Yeah, can you go up? So we thank you, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clovis, for that presentation. We do have a few minutes. If there are any questions, I would invite anyone to raise their hand if they'd like to come off mute and ask questions directly, or feel free to put them into the chat if that's not possible. Blaise, I can see you've posted some resources into the chat. I don't know if you want to speak about those a little bit as well.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted just to add something about what was in the previous presentation, talking about the challenges of awareness raising in Goma. Now, after the assessment done by Action Aid, there is now a volcano museum which is implemented in Goma by the support of the Royal Museum for Central Africa. And there is also another serious game which is implemented in Goma, also to support the knowledge and the awareness raising among the students. And also, as I said before, there are already some results about the population behaviors, so that the stat team of DRC can know that there are some researchers who are working about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blaise. I'll be sure to share those resources with the minutes so that everybody can access them after the meeting. Is there anybody else who would like to come off mute to ask a question or to give a comment on the presentation? Yves, please.
Je voulais seulement dire au niveau des opportunités manquées, si vous pouvez rentrer à ce slide-là, pour développer les systèmes d'alerte communautaire, il y avait un travail qui a été fait l'année passée dans le cadre de Hackathon de 2021. Si vous ouvrez ces liens-là, vous allez voir le travail qui a été fait, où des potes, on a proposé un prototype de comment alerter les communautés à temps utile en utilisant la communication, les SMS, le WhatsApp, etc. Mais malheureusement, le gouvernement continue à traîner les pas. Il n'a pas accroché à cette opportunité et le projet reste en souffrance. Et avec les projets d'innovation, cette question est en train encore revenir sur la table. Et pour nous, c'est une grande opportunité qu'on doit encore mettre sur la table parce que c'est vraiment un besoin au niveau communautaire. Donc, continuer le dialogue avec le gouvernement pour que ça soit rendu effectif. Merci.
Merci, Yves. I'll also be sure to share this link, which will be available in the slides, which will come round after the meeting as well. Matthias, please.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for the great presentations. That's very interesting. I was wondering a bit more on the general level on the anticipation of volcanic eruption. Has there been, because when we talk about the need, as I heard, the need for better preparedness, contingency planning, all these more like resilience building elements that are not necessarily part of a classical start fund anticipation alert that looks really for a very specific time window. Has there been exchange with German Red Cross and other Red Cross societies, particularly Middle America, Central America, South America? I think there's a lot of experience on forecasting volcanic activities, ashfall, and so on, but rather than built into early action protocols that also have the contingency planning element and that have the long-term preparedness element towards a warning. And I was wondering if there was any exchange and learning from that. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much. Actually, we did invite the German Red Cross to present today. Unfortunately, as we do have a couple of presentations from the Philippines as well, the time zones didn't quite work out. But I do have some resources that they shared with us included later on in these slides, which I'll kind of share around as well for people to look at. And we can obviously facilitate any kind of connections there and lesson learned sort of sharing as well, if that's helpful. Anna, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Milli, and thank you, guys, for the question. Well, I think I mentioned in the chat box one of the early anticipation action that we had is in relation to lahar risk, and I think when we conducted it, colleagues in the AA space weren't actually looking at it as an anticipatory action because the work was not the usual. It didn't appear like a usual anticipatory action. It basically worked with government colleagues, for example, from HR who are here. It was conducted by CARE, HI, and Christian A during that time. So it was a study on the lahar risk, where it is flowing, the presence of safe space in the area where the lahar will be flowing, and at the same time, also work with the provincial and municipal government in introducing lahar risk in their contingency planning. At the same time, also from the scientific study, identifying the threshold for debris flow, wherein at what level, how much rain will move the lahar deposit along the foot of the volcano, Mayon volcano. So with that information, it was included, and it has resulted to a retrofitting of the existing contingency planning of the province and the municipal at the same time at the barangay level. Now, as a result of that, a learning grant was also accessed by START Network members to be able to not only review whether that was used, especially after Typhoon Bonnie last year, whether it has resulted to the implementation of the lahar threshold for debris flow. And in areas where it was implemented, there was zero casualty, but in municipalities where it was not heeded, that's when certain communities are actually buried in lahar, and there were casualties. So the lessons from that particular intervention was also shared in another province, Batangas, where another volcano is located, which is Taal. So there is actually effort to sort of share and export learnings from one province, especially given that Taal has not really erupted. Erupted in a very strong way as it did in the 60s. So compared to the province of Albay, it didn't have the different contingency plans and warning system. Therefore, a sharing of lessons and information was deemed necessary. Also, I think colleagues from RI and HI will be presenting the recent experience on anticipatory action regarding Taal volcanic risk later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And as you say, we will come on to the Philippines presentation in slightly more detail shortly. But for now, our next speaker sadly wasn't able to join us, but Anna, I am actually handing back to you to introduce Dr. Lagmay, who has sent a video, obviously in his absence. Anna, back to you, please.
Okay, good afternoon and good morning again. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker who shared a presentation, but due to an appointment that he cannot avoid, he just shared this presentation with us. Dr. Mahar Lagmay is an academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology and a professor at the National Institute of Geological Sciences, University of the Philippines. He is also the director of the UP Nationwide Operational Assessment of Hazards, or UP NOAA, and the executive director of the University of the Philippines Resilience Institute. He holds a PhD degree in Earth Sciences from the University of Cambridge. His work is focused on volcano tectonics, fluid dynamics of volcanic flows, remote sensing, and permanent scatter interferometry of faulted regions. He is always requested also to conduct post-disaster forensic investigation, especially when it comes to geological emergencies. So please let us listen to the presentation from Dr. Lagmay. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alfredo Mahar Lagmay, and I will talk about anticipating volcanic hazards. The talk will revolve mainly about Philippine volcanoes, but the concepts discussed are generally the same for explosive volcanoes worldwide. The Philippines has more than 200 volcanoes. Out of this number, 24 are active, about 25 are potentially active, and the rest are inactive. The most active volcano of the Philippines is Mayon volcano. Other well-known active volcanoes of the country are Bulusan, Taal, Hibok-Hibok, and Pinatubo volcanoes. In 1991, Pinatubo volcano erupted and generated a 36-kilometer plume that caused widespread devastation. Last year, on 12 January 2020, Taal volcano suddenly erupted after 43 years of repose, producing a 17 to 21 kilometer high eruption column causing millions of pesos in property damage. The eruption that happened in Taal was an explosive type of eruption. Not all volcanoes, however, erupt in such manner. Majority of volcanoes, if they do erupt in a relatively quiescent manner, spewing only hot, molten material called lava that flow along the flanks of a volcano without generating an eruption column similar to the one that happened in Pinatubo and Taal. Volcanoes are not just found anywhere. They are usually found in zones of the earth where there are earthquakes. Around the Pacific Ocean, earthquakes and explosive volcanism occur. Because material erupted by a volcano is associated with fire, and because a lot of volcanoes and volcanism occurs around the Pacific Ocean, it is called the Pacific Ring of Fire. The Philippines is one of those countries, along with Japan, Indonesia, Western United States, Western Canada, Alaska, that are in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Active volcanoes in the Philippines are well monitored with sophisticated instruments on the ground and in space. Volcanoes like Mayon, Taal, Tulusan, Canlaon, and Pinatubo in the Philippines are like patients in the intensive care unit of a hospital. When there is some strange activity like earthquake swarms, bulging of the volcano slopes, and increased degassing, volcano observatories raise the alert levels according to increasing parameters. These alert levels have corresponding actions on the ground and need to be accurate. Each volcano behaves differently, and therefore the alert levels are unique for every volcano. For example, the alert levels and corresponding response actions for Philippine volcanoes are different, and their corresponding alert level schemes crafted based on knowledge of their past behavior. It is important that these alert levels and actions on the ground are reviewed and planned in advance with the community for effective disaster prevention and mitigation. Volcanism has a lot of good points, and people benefit from them. They are the source of heat for hot springs and geothermal energy. They give us oxygen. It reverses temporarily global warming, provides nutrients to soil, and is a thing of natural beauty. But not all are good about volcanoes. When they erupt, they generate hazards which can kill. These are pyroclastic density currents, which can be categorized further into pyroclastic flows and pyroclastic surges, pyroclastic fall or ash fall, debris avalanches, lahar, lava, tsunami, and noxious gases. All of these hazards have corresponding mitigation measures, but in order for the correct mitigation intervention to be effective, it is necessary that the hazards be understood first. Over the past 30 to 50 years, much was learned about volcanoes and volcanism, enough for us to lower the number of casualties from frequent volcanic eruptions. But learning never ends, and there is a need to know more about volcanoes, especially for what we call as supervolcanoes, those volcanoes that erupt catastrophically with huge volumes of ejected material that it can blanket the earth, block the sun, cool the earth to an extent that it can cause years without any summer. Pyroclastic flows are hot density currents that flow down the flanks of the volcano. In French, they are called, pardon my French, nuages ardentes, which simply means hot glowing clouds. You're looking at a picture of a Mayon volcano eruption that generated a plume with a lot of ejected particles called pyroclastics that rise up into the air. Not all, however, rise. Some fall back and generate a hot ground-hugging flow traveling down the slopes of the volcano at speeds as fast as a car on the highway. These ground-hugging flows are hot and dense and contain rocks of various sizes. Many have died from pyroclastic flows, including Filipinos living near the slopes of Mayon volcano. One such example was when Mayon volcano suddenly erupted in 1993, generating pyroclastic flows which killed almost 100 Filipinos. A not so dense type of pyroclastic flow, one that is more dilute, is called as a pyroclastic surge. Taal volcano's eruption generated wet pyroclastic surges called as base surges. Base surges look like the basal cloud produced by a nuclear bomb explosion. In the 2020 eruption of Taal volcano, base surges overwhelmed the community of Calawim, killing more than 1,000 livestock. Trees were splintered, bamboo were ruptured due to the dynamic pressure of base surges. Impact pressures were in the order of 2 to 4 kilopascals and with velocities of about 20 to 40 meters per second. If you are familiar with the photos of dead people in Pompeii, with most of them striking a catatonic position, most of them were killed by pyroclastic density currents. Pyroclastic fall is another type of hazard. During the recent Pinatubo and Taal eruptions, ash fall, sometimes called as tephra fall or pyroclastic fall, were seen in Metro Manila. The thickness of the ash fall in Metro Manila was about 1 millimeter, or half the thickness of a 1 peso coin. They can be hazardous because the minute falling particles are made of glass, sharp glass. They are known to cause a disease called as pneumono-ultramicroscopico silicovolcanoconiosis, which is the longest word in the English dictionary. Silicosis is a form of occupational lung disease caused by the inhalation of crystalline silica dust and is marked by inflammation and scarring in the form of nodular lesions in the upper lobes of the lungs. Pyroclastic fall can also be dangerous because it can cause the roof of houses to collapse. A 1 by 1 meter box filled with ash fall weighs about 1,300 to 1,500 kilograms. Because of its weight, the roof of houses near erupting volcanoes collapse from deposited ash fall. Many have died from this type of hazard. Debris avalanches are another type of hazard associated with volcanoes. These are landslides from the large-scale collapse of the flank of the volcano. A whole sector of the volcano may collapse because of the pull of gravity. One such example is the one that is shown where the northern flank of Mount St. Helens volcano collapsed, resulting in a debris avalanche. Needless to say, these are extremely dangerous if there are communities in the path of the debris avalanche. Debris avalanches have happened in some Philippine volcanoes in Iriga volcano, Banahaw volcano, and Canlaon volcano. All these examples have a large chunk of the volcano edifice removed, creating an amphitheater. Lahar is an Indonesian term for volcanic mudflow. When it rains, volcanic deposits on the flanks of the volcano get remobilized and flow down as boulders and sand-rich torrents of flood. Lahars that contain 20 to 60% sediments are usually very turbulent. Lahars that contain greater than 80% sediment usually flow more smoothly, what we call as laminar flow. These smooth flowing lahars usually travel much faster than their turbulent counterparts and can float boulders, cars, buildings, and bridges. They can travel at speeds of more than 100 kilometers per hour and are highly erosive. Perhaps the most familiar type of volcanic hazard to people is lava. This is what we see in most Hollywood movies when they show a volcano erupting, where dinosaurs try to flee from, or when there is someone to be sacrificed and thrown into a volcanic crater. They are reddish-colored fluid material that ponds like lake water in the mouth of a volcano. Lavas are indeed hot and range in temperature from about 600 to 1000 degrees centigrade. Lava is just magma. The difference is that magma is hot molten material underneath the earth, and lava is hot molten material that has reached the surface of the earth. Lavas can flow down the volcano's flanks and can be thrown out like a fountain or be ejected like a ballistic bomb. When lavas flow along the flanks of the volcano, they travel at speeds of 10 to 30 kilometers per hour, depending on the composition of the lava. Some are more fluid than others. Those that are more fluid, of course, travel faster. Lava can burn and bulldoze everything in its path and are extremely dangerous. Tsunamis can also be generated by volcanoes and volcanism. Underwater explosions and shock waves caused by large explosions can trigger tsunamis, even ones that occur above the waterline. Shock waves coupling with sea waves can produce tsunamis up to several meters in height. Sometimes the energy of the eruption all by itself can make the sea behave in extremely dangerous ways. A huge collapse or landslide from the flanks of the volcano can also generate a tsunami. So remember, not all tsunamis are produced by earthquakes. Volcanic activity or collapse can generate tsunamis too. Volcanoes release gases, tephra, which are broken fragments from inside the volcano, and heat into the atmosphere. The most abundant of the gases released into the atmosphere is water vapor. It's a good thing that they are harmless. The gases are transported away by being carried by ash particles, while others form into either salts or are transformed into aerosols. Volcanic gases may also be generated when water is heated by magma. They can also escape from pyroclastic flows, lahars, and lava flows. Gases can also be produced from burning vegetation. The most common type of gas released by volcanoes are water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. They are the most common volcanic gases. In much lesser amounts, volcanoes can also release carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, carbonyl sulfide, carbon disulfide, hydrogen chloride, hydrogen, methane, hydrogen fluoride, boron, hydrogen bromine, mercury, vapor, organic compounds, and believe it or not, even gold. Water vapor, which is the most abundant gas emanating from volcanoes, is harmless. Carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and hydrogen halides in significant amounts are all potentially hazardous to people, animals, agriculture, and property. When carbon dioxide, a dense and invisible gas, was released from the bottom of Lake Nyos, it flowed down the slopes of the volcano and killed 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock. Harmful concentrations of volcanic gases usually do not extend further than 10 kilometers from the volcano. Acid rain can also be produced when high concentrations of these gases are leached out of the atmosphere. When Katmai volcano in Alaska erupted in 1912, acid rain fell from the sky and damaged clothes that were being dried up to 2,000 kilometers away in Canada. Calcium fluoride, if concentrated, can burn vegetation and other objects on contact. Fluoride and chloride can contaminate water. Livestock have died from drinking such contaminated water. Fluoride and chloride can also be irritating to the skin and eyes and can damage clothes and machinery. In summary, volcanoes can be studied and monitored well. These information give us advanced warning signals and provide us with the ability to more or less predict when a volcano will erupt. These early warning signals prompt us to prepare for imminent danger, but in order for the response to be effective, must be planned long in advance with people in the community with maps for each type of volcanic hazard. Volcano alert levels have corresponding actions on the ground and must be mastered by everyone living in the shadow of a volcano.
All right, a huge thank you to Dr. Lagmay, I think, for such an engaging presentation, despite the fact that he wasn't actually able to join us today. Although he's not with us, he has offered to respond to any questions that people may have. So please do feel free to pop those into the chat and we can pass those on and get responses for you if anybody does have any questions. I think now I'm handing over to Leah to introduce our next speaker. So Leah, please, over to you.
Hi, so for our next presentation, it will be on the Inclusive Anticipatory Taal Action Project, which was a consortium initiative led by Relief International with Humanity and Inclusion, Save the Children, and local partner Yakap sa Unlaran ng Bata. Our speakers for today are Ms. Norma Constantino and Carissa Galla from Humanity and Inclusion. So Ms. Constantino started her work in Relief International as a program coordinator for the Start Fund-supported Typhoon Winter Response, which was led by Action Against Hunger. She is RI's program manager, overseeing the country's humanitarian and development programming and providing technical and operational support to its various projects. Currently, Bing is Relief International's OIC country director. And Ms. Cara Galla is Humanity and Inclusion's DRRM technical specialist and emergency focal person responsible for developing projects on inclusive DRR, providing technical support on inclusive DRRM in project implementation. She has also contributed to the promotion of inclusive DRRM through policy formulation, lobbying work, and advocacy. Cara has led several anticipation alert note submissions on actions such as Lahar risk anticipation, anticipation of volcanic eruption, and anticipation of disease outbreaks. Cara is also currently a member of START Network's Philippine DRF Technical Working Group. Over to you, Bing and Cara.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening to those from the Philippines. So on behalf of our lead consortium, Relief International, and our consortium partner, Save the Children, and myself from Humanity and Inclusion, we are presenting the lessons learned and best practices from the IATAC project funded by START Network. This is the Inclusive Anticipatory Taal Action Project. Next slide, please. So to give a quick context, on July 1, 2021, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, PHIVOLCS, raised Taal volcanoes alert level to 3. PHIVOLCS and Dr. Mahar Lagmay from the former Project NOAA said that volcanic eruption was highly imminent and might lead to alert level 4. This is also coming from the previous year where there was an actual raising of the alert to level 4 in January 2020, January 25, 2020. So following the activation of the alert anticipation, START Network funded the IATAC consortium, and the project began on July 17. However, 6 days after the activation, the alert level was downgraded to alert level 2 by PHIVOLCS with the no regrets approach and still with the support from START Network. And amidst a very challenging COVID-19 situation, the implementation still continued. Also with the threat that the Taal volcano was very unpredictable. So there is an important message from the IATAC team that the inclusion and anticipatory action needed to be embedded in the DRM programs. And this is what we discovered throughout the project. So next slide, please. So the program of intervention proposed by the IATAC team consisted of, for the community, rapid and comprehensive educational campaigns through risk communication and community engagement with the households as the stakeholders. We distributed hygiene, PPE, and disinfection kits. We raised awareness and disseminated reporting mechanisms for GBV or gender-based violence and protection against sexual exploitation and abuse. So the hotline numbers and the focal persons where to report incidences, these are what we disseminated. And then we also distributed inclusive pre-disaster unconditional multipurpose cash through and also using the Washington Group of Questions to collect gender, age, and disability data that was also embedded in our beneficiary selection tool. At the local government level, we supported the continuity of services, specifically focusing on the continuous activation of help desks. So these are focusing on violence against women and children protection help desks. So it was like a business continuity training to ensure that even if there is Taal volcano eruption, these services, these protection services will continue. And then we did mapping of community resources, focusing on the capacity of communities to conduct first aid, to conduct MHPSS, search and rescue, and evacuation. And then we also did mapping of livelihood resources, agricultural and fishery resources, including safe evacuation sites, focal persons for quick response teams for livestock evacuation, resources for their supplies, evacuation, and supplies for their relocation, and then other data collection related to livelihood mapping. Livestock mapping. And then we provided training to community volunteers and local government units to augment the resources, human resources needed by the government, focusing on the topic of inclusive anticipation action. It included the topic of first aid, inclusive early warning kits, MHPSS or mental health, psychosocial support, and then training on awareness raising about, we also maximize the IEC materials of FIVOCs. So we trained them about the different alert level from the Philippine Institute of Volcanology, or specific to Taal warning. So they already have existing IEC information education and communication materials. So we also use that during the training and rapid comprehensive educational campaigns. We also distributed and consulted the LGU before coming up with the content of the inclusive early warning kits that included devices for audio and visual devices to make sure that the warning reaches everyone, including persons with disabilities. Also at the government level, we focused on advocacy activities on inclusive anticipation action to emphasize the need for not just response or DRR, but focusing on anticipation action that monitors the Taal volcano activity. Next slide, please. So the result of the consortium's activities included integrated approach on WASH, protection, cash, livelihood, health, and DRR. We covered 6 municipalities, 1 province, and 14 barangays. In our inclusive risk communication and community engagement, we were able to reach 34,000 people. I'm also here with my other colleagues from our consortium, Jerome from Save the Children, Norman from Save the Children and Relief International, OTEP, and Bing, who were involved in the implementation. Ms. Bing is the country director of RI, so they were involved in the implementation of the IATAC project. Related to cash transfer, we collected data using the Washington Group of Questions to use a rights-based approach in disability data collection, we were able to cover 3,180 households. For capacity building of community volunteers to augment the human resource of local government units, we were able to give training to 899 community volunteers. And then we also came up with good recommendations and findings from the mapping of livestock and community resources. Again, we were able to distribute to 21 LGUs COVID-19 protection and disinfection kits, and of course, the inclusive early warning kits. So this was, of course, supported by the LGU because we consulted them first before the coming up with the kit content. And lastly, the advocacy sessions with the LGUs or local government units. Next slide, please. So the IATAC project, the consortium had a very, very good experience. We have good relationship with Relief International, Save the Children, and Humanity and Inclusion, and we really loved the IATAC project. Here we found out the importance of anticipation action as an approach. That in any type of emergency, whether it's typhoon or volcanic eruption, there is a need to really involve the government agencies. We found out that anticipatory action is still a new concept for the community and the local governments. So the advocacy component was very important. There's also, we also realized the importance of supporting and strengthening the Local Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. So we found out through the mapping activities, resource mapping, that some government units already had quick response teams for the livelihood evacuation, livestock evacuation. They already had, some of them had evacuation vehicles, evacuation sites, supplies for livestock evacuation. However, there were still some gaps. Not all LGUs had these resources. There was also a need to collaborate with the local government of neighboring provinces because evacuation involved relocating or temporarily evacuating to other provinces that would not be reached by the hazards coming from the Taal volcanic eruption. So also there was a need for concrete actions, not only preparedness plan, but training and of course awareness raising through the communication campaigns. Materials were very important, so these are already existing coming from PVOCs. We also found out that the local government unit, at the barangay level, provided very good feedback about the support that we provided, including the mapping of the assessment and the mapping. It was okay for them to find out their existing strengths and weaknesses when it comes to livestock evacuation and community resource mapping. So we applied for a tweak in the process and implemented this for 90 days, hoping that we could do some behavioral change to lower potential damage. We wanted to influence the mindset of the local government and the communities by emphasizing the need for anticipatory action. So we also found out the importance of support at the local level, barangay and communities. And we already mentioned this earlier. Some local government units, they never conducted preemptive evacuation. But after the assessment, they found out that preemptive evacuation of livestock should be done at alert level 2. So it's too late if we do it at alert level 3 or 4. So it should be done at alert level 2. And then for cash, it was because it was unconditional multi-purpose cash. Even if this is a 90-day project, we could already see the positive impact. There was already resilience being built among the households who received the cash transfer. The cash they received was already revolving, and they were already earning extra income by using the cash that they were able to receive. So next slide, please. So other key achievements, well-grounded needs assessment, inputs from key stakeholders from the government and Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. So we consulted them continuously, even during the alert note writing, including target areas, target communities, of course, the government about the kit content and the activities that we were implementing. Of course, this was a very dangerous time because this was COVID-19, the dangerous COVID-19 period. So that was the main challenge that we faced. But still, some of our best practices included an integrated approach with financial and material support, capacity training, and communication with inclusion of COVID-19. So as the community and local government could be better prepared in case of the imminent crisis. We also found out that different clusters were very important. And here, the highlight here was also the animal and livestock and fishery cluster. There were focal persons for them, quick response teams that can be called during the event of a volcanic eruption. Importance of risk communication and community engagement on DRR related to volcanic eruption. It was very context specific. So it was focused on the behavior of Taal volcano, very unique, different from the behavior of other volcanoes. And it was important for the community to understand what to do in case of an emergency. So even if there were permanent danger zones, some households were still not evacuating. So this is how important it was to communicate the risk. And then importance of inclusion. So all partners, Save the Children and RI, so of course, HI, we were very happy that our partners really appreciated and up to now they're still celebrating the all of society approach that we did, including participation of persons with disabilities, women, and other sectors such as agriculture and fisheries sector. Protection, there was a strong protection component in the IATAC project, focusing of course on the dissemination of the reporting mechanisms for gender-based violence and PSEA incidents. And then livelihood assessment. So even if there were identified gaps, this identification of opportunities for improvement provided a great starting point for the local government units to strengthen their capacities to anticipate the Taal volcanic eruption. Of course, there were prepositioning of inclusive materials, for example, the inclusive early warning kits that we hope that they will use in future Taal volcanic eruptions, and then partnering with local NGOs and with the consortium. That was really a positive experience for us. So next slide, please. Okay, so the presentation is done. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, our colleagues can help answer. Thank you.
Huge thank you to you, Cara, and to all members of the IATAC consortium for this such a detailed review of the project. And I see that Anna has mentioned in the chat that an assessment will be taking place shortly. So I think we all look forward to hearing the outcome of that as well. That's the last presentation of the day. I just want to open the floor to see if there are any other questions or comments. So please do feel free to raise your hand now if you'd like to come in with any any comments or points for discussion. And obviously feel free to use the chat as well if coming off mute isn't possible for you. I don't know if there are any further comments for today. If not, I suppose we can move on to the next sort of section. But please do feel free to put any questions into the chat if they come up. As I continue speaking. So if we could just reshare the slides again. I just wanted to mention that when these kind of come round as a resource, there are the links to some videos, a blog post, and a kind of a summary of some of the resources that the German Red Cross have made available through some of their work in Central America that Matthias mentioned earlier. So those videos are available there. Feel free to follow up with the slides when they come round, and you can watch those there. They are in Spanish, but obviously therefore any Spanish speakers on the call today. And then just a final update from the Anticipation Hub, who weren't actually able to join us today. They just asked me to mention that there are a few dialogue platforms coming up. So the first one is the Latin America and Caribbean dialogue platform. I think that should come through as a link there. They also have the 6th Asia Pacific dialogue platform coming up, which is linked there. And the global dialogue platform as well is also coming up. I can see Eve, you've raised your hand. Sure, please go ahead.
Oui, c'est Yves Cafod RDC, aussi membre d'IHAB RDC. Je voulais juste commenter sur deux choses. La première, c'est par rapport à l'intervention de Blaise sur les études comportementales à intégrer dans la phase d'anticipation. Donc, c'est à prendre en compte, mais on ne les ferait pas seulement avant, on les ferait aussi après l'éruption. Au cas où l'éruption a lieu, on fait l'étude dans cette phase d'alerte ou d'anticipation, mais on fait encore cette étude après pour voir si les gens se sont comportés tels que c'était attendu. Une autre chose, c'est par rapport au budget de la recherche. Au budget de la recherche que le programme FOREWARN met en place. Quel est le pourcentage affecté à la recherche? Parce qu'on ne peut pas faire de bonnes projections sans investir dans la recherche. Merci.
Thank you very much, Yves. Blaise, I don't know if you want to respond first to the first part of that comment.
Oui, je vais répondre en français, donc merci. Exactement comme Yves l'a mentionné, c'est très important d'évaluer avant et après une éruption, comme le cas de l'éruption passée ici de 2000. Donc, l'éruption passée, parce que exactement, l'expérience de la population va influencer sur comment est-ce qu'ils vont agir et les actions d'anticipation dépendra de comment est-ce que la population va collaborer et comment est-ce que la population va s'engager dans ces activités d'anticipation. Alors, pour autre chose que je voulais mentionner spécifiquement dans la partie CDD Globe ou le Global South comme on l'appelle, Les actions d'anticipation spécifiquement pour le cas des éruptions volcaniques est vraiment un défi. Pourquoi? Parce que nous sommes dans des situations premièrement d'abord rareté des données. Nous avons des volcans qui ne sont pas vraiment suffisamment très bien étudiés, comme les cas qu'on vient de présenter ici des volcans aux Philippines ou dans d'autres pays. Mais aussi là où il y a peut-être encore moins de collaboration entre les scientifiques et les partenaires chargés de la réduction des risques de catastrophes, mais aussi, comme Yves venait de le souligner, là où nous avons aussi encore de budgets qui sont très limités en termes de recherche. Et donc, une réussite des actions d'anticipation pour le cas des régions volcaniques comme celle des Goma nécessite vraiment une inclusion de tous les partenaires et de bien y réfléchir pour être à mesure d'avoir des réponses ou des actions d'anticipation qui réussissent pour réunir le peu de données qui sont et de savoir bien les interpréter. Donc, ça reste encore un défi très majeur pour notre région. Merci.
Merci, Blaise. Thank you very much. Yves, would you like to respond, or shall I move to the second part of your question?
Oui, c'est ça, c'est bon, c'est bon. On peut passer à la deuxième, mais je voulais juste recommander pour cette opportunité manquée de l'alerte communautaire, le système d'alerte communautaire. Si FOREWARN peut conjuguer les efforts avec des potes, et comme ça qu'on voit si ça peut être opérationnalisé, commencer avec les hubs, les discussions avec les services étatiques pour que ces projets ne restent pas en suspens, surtout que le prototype est déjà en place. Quand vous allez lire, vous verrez qu'on était déjà au niveau du prototypage. Il restait seulement à tester les systèmes. Une autre chose, c'est que pourquoi on n'insère pas la résilience dans les FOREWARN, parce que la résilience inclut aussi cette anticipation. Merci.
Thank you, Yves. Just to go back to the first part of your question about the amount of budgets available, as Anna has mentioned in the chat, analysis for action grants are available to START network members, and there are also tool grants available for developing kind of forecasting tools that would work on an ongoing basis. So if you'd like more information about that, I've just put the email address for the anticipation team into the chat there, and you can get in contact with them for more information about how to access that budget and what it can be used for. In terms of the question around FOREWARN and resilience, I think it's all part of a spectrum, and you know, a lot of the anticipation activities, as you mentioned, can fall under resilience. The focus generally is on specific events that are expected to occur, but I think resilience can play a part in kind of the programming that takes place to kind of reduce the impact of some of those hazards as well. Is there anybody else on the line who'd like to add to the discussion, to come off mute and ask a question? In that case, I think all that's left, firstly, is to say a huge thank you to our speakers who joined us today, and to our speakers who sent through presentations for us if they weren't able to join. So thank you to the DRC Hub especially, and thank you also to Dr. Lagmay, Dr. Daep, and also, of course, to Christine Murphy for her review of the START Fund. And then finally to say thank you to everybody who took the time to join us today. It's great to see such a big turnout as always, and thank you for bearing with the slight technical difficulties at the start there. And I'd just like to ask if anyone who's able to could come off camera so we could take a photo as usual of everyone who's managed to join the meeting today. I think if we can add this to gallery view, then we should be able to see everybody. Great, thank you everybody. All right, in that case, thank you all.
Merci,
I'll be sharing.
merci.
I'll be sharing the minutes after the end of the meeting, and the slides and all the presentations will be available for you with the video. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Thank you.
Merci à tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone. Salamat.